Hi, I'm Andrew Childers for the Tuts Plus Network, and today I'm going to teach you about mastering one of the trickiest lighting situations that photographers deal with. When we're in the shade, we can get perfect portraits or photos, but when we step into the light and have backlighting or side lighting, things get a lot trickier. That's why today I'm going to teach you 3 techniques for dealing with backlighting so that you can add it to the list of situations that you can shoot with confidence. One of the reasons that our cameras struggle with handling backlighting is the way that most cameras meter by default. Now, metering is the way that our camera calculates how much light is in a scene and then chooses the settings accordingly. Now, by default, most cameras have what's called evaluative metering or full scene metering. And the issue with that is that it takes all the light from the frame into account when choosing settings. Now, if we switch our camera from evaluative or full scene metering into spot or center weighted metering, then what we gain is the fact that the camera is just looking at part of the frame to choose the right settings. Now, this is really handy because when we're shooting portraits, we can just have the camera take into account the way that the subject is in light, or in this case, in the shade. All right, we're going to tackle the first technique I've shown you on how to handle backlighting with changing the metering mode. Now, the first thing I want to do is illustrate the issue with using full scene or evaluative metering in this shot. You're going to see that because the light's at his back and it's mostly a backlit scene with the shadow in front of him, that the camera's going to meter to put him in the shadows. Let's take a look. Okay, now we're going to change our metering mode so that we use spot or center weighted style metering so that we only take into account the lighting situation on the front of his body. Let's go ahead and take a look. You can see that the exposure is much better now because spot metering only took into account the light on the front of his body to calculate the exposure. The next technique that I'm going to teach you involves using one of my favorite tools to master backlighting, and that is a small hot shoe style flash. You can see here I've got it off camera wirelessly set up using a set of radio poppers, but the same technique applies even if the flash is on camera. Now, what I'm going to do here is meter it with traditional methods that would normally have my subject in the shade, and then fill that shaded area with this flash. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you some things to look for. The first thing I'm going to show you is what the scene looks like without the use of the flash. So I'm going to go ahead and fire a frame, let the camera choose all the settings with evaluative metering, and then we'll add the flash. Now, you can see here that my subject's strongly in the shade, and that's obviously an issue. But if we introduce the flash, and I'm just going to hold it and angle it at him, that's going to provide enough fill light to expose our frame properly. Now, with this kind of lighting setup, we can create some really unique situations visually so that it looks like the subject's being shot at a completely different time of day. And most importantly, it allows us to balance some of the backlighting with the front lighting and thus create a perfect exposure even on bright days.
For the last part of our backlighting mastery series, I want to show you the easiest way to fix backlighting after production. And even though it's better to get things right in camera the first time, the reality is that it's not always possible. And this is so easy, you're going to see why I don't understand why many photographers fear backlighting so much. You can see here that my subject is in the shade and is a little too dark, and all we have to do is bring the exposure up, and that exposes them properly. Now, shooting in RAW is a big reason that you're going to be able to retain the exposure information and make sure that we can, drag the exposure sliders as we need. And even here in this area where you can see that we have, still some information left and some background pieces that we don't want, if we bring our highlights and our whites up, it completely blows that out. And even though this frame isn't exposed perfectly, it gives us a great effect and really puts our subject into a nice view. I want to show you one more trick that I use to reduce one of the biggest issues with backlighting, which is this purple fringing that you see on the edge of dark colored objects. In the lens correction section under the color tab, if you drag this slider up, that removes the purple fringing. And as simple as that, we've removed that issue. So in this course, we've really talked a lot about 3 different ways that you can solve backlighting really easily. For the Tuts Plus Network, I'm Andrew Childers. Thanks for joining me.